always go at this age group on the development of skills, the fine-tuning of skills, the reinforcement of skills, and the opportunity for continuous repetition throughout skills, of the skills throughout our games. The conditioned or small-sided training games should only be used when skill levels are at an appropriate level. There's no point in putting children into a 3 against 3, 4 against 4 game, focusing on hand passing when the reality is that the children can't hand pass the ball back and forth to each other standing still. They're not going to get any better at it just because they're in a game, and truth be told, they'll probably not enjoy it anymore because the ball will spend more time on the ground than it will in the air in their hands. Start with token pressure 5v1, 4v1 to ensure the players are still getting an opportunity to execute the core skills required. Ensure that the coach's focus remains on skill execution and technique rather than the competitiveness of the game. So always keep the goal in mind. Always remember what the purpose and what the focus of the exercise is. Don't allow your train of thought to deviate into a games-based exercise, focusing on what the players are doing from a games perspective if the focus of the game is to develop skills. Use questioning and coaching interventions to increase pressure on players. Skills levels will increase over time. Okay, so continuously ask them questions throughout the games. Don't be afraid to let it run for 30 seconds, 40 seconds. Stop it for a quick 10 seconds to ask various players different questions around their skill execution, around their choice of decision, around their movement patterns, whatever the case may be. Consider the quality of all skills during games-based practice. Do not allow players to develop lazy or poor technique. That might be from a tackler's perspective. Don't allow them to pull jerseys or get lazy. Don't allow the players in possession of the ball to get away with loopy hand passes or lazy passes. Okay, so look, we've got a wee quick video here, guys, and I just want you to cast your eye. Look, for those of you, if you're having any issues watching this video, hopefully the bulk of you will be able to see it okay. But if you are having issues, folks, it's probably at your end because by all accounts, these videos have been working successfully for about 2 weeks now, given what happened last week. So fingers crossed you'll be able to see it, okay? Okay, so guys, we're going to play the video one more time and we'll just talk over the top of it. Okay, so obviously it's a 3v1 situation where the focus is very much on the players in possession of the ball to keep the ball off the defender in the yellow bib. Be cautious of incidents like that where there's a lazy tackle coming in. Be cautious of the hands moving there when the ball's being shifted around the grip, because in a match that could get the foul. Be cautious of the defender diving in there at the end. Focus on the player in possession of the ball. Focus on the players who are not in possession of the ball, but constantly reinforce the message about skill refinement, about skill execution. Always demand the very, very best, even in those games-based situations. Don't allow the standards of performance to drop either from a games perspective or from a skill execution perspective. Okay, now what are the key coach messages for each of the players in this particular screenshot or this screen grab from that video? Okay, I'm just going to pass you over to Gareth here, and he's going to just do a wee bit of interactive with you here in terms of the lettering and the messages that you would be delivering to each player.
Okay, so thanks, Connor. So listen, guys, if you look, we've got 4 players here and they're all lettered. So in the chat box, if you could pick a player and just say, for example, player C, and I just want you to put in the chat box, how would you coach the player? So for example, if I was going to coach player C, a coaching point I would throw out to this player is keep your head up. So you're in possession of the ball, and I want you to keep your head up at all times so that you can see all the options available to you. So if you can just pick a player there for me, and if you can just type in the chat box, a clear, simple coaching message that you would give to one of the players there. There's somebody in. Player A and D, call and point to where they want the ball. Brilliant. Start moving. Use the correct hand to pass. Move to give an option. D, keep moving and look for the ball. So looking at the tackler, closing the space, make yourself big hands out. So again, absolutely brilliant. Some real short, sharp, concise coaching points that players of this age can relate to. We're not using big words. We're just using that sort of three or four word message. Brilliant. Find space, run into space. Okay. Excellent. So listen, thanks for that. There'll be in the following slides we'll have we'll look at other ways of looking at this. So good stuff. Okay, so when we look here at, I suppose, when we're supposed to how to coach and in situations in the video that Connor showed you there, when we do coach that and we run that activity at training, that 3v1, I suppose, firstly, what's your focus for it and maybe how does it fit into your theme for the session that night? But when you're doing that, how are you coaching it? So are you an instructive coach and you're saying to player D, run to this space, run there, move here. If you're saying to the tackler, get your hands up, be big, don't dive in, move your feet. If you're that sort of coach, if I was to start shouting commands at you now, how much would you actually take in? So as a player, how much would a player take in? So are you trying to be that questioning coach? And are you trying to provide your question with powerful questions where you're going to, I suppose, provide some innovation and then get some action out of them? So that's what we're looking to do with the players. We're looking to throw them a wee question, have them think a wee bit about it, trying to have them think when they're playing and put them in these situations so that when it comes in a game that they're hopefully trying to make the right decisions. So you'll see on the left hand side here in the bottom, it's less powerful questions right up to the top of the triangle. We've got more powerful questions. So your less powerful questions are those questions that just provide you as a coach with a yes or no answer. So you ask a question like that, what are you really gaining out of it? Probably nothing. What's the player gaining out of it? Probably nothing. They could be guessing because they're able to say yes or no. So if I said to player C, well, by you passing the ball to player D, was that the right pass? He's hazarding a guess at that because it might have been or it mightn't have been. So it's a 50-50. It's yes or no. My question to him, which might be a bit more powerful, could be, who should you have passed to? So he could give me back three answers here. He could say player A, player C, or player D, or he could say nobody. I should have held on to the ball and maintained possession. So already by simply asking that question and giving them those couple of options, that player has to think. Now, at this age group, they may not get it straight away. So this is something as a coach you should be trying to implement or integrate into your session, in every session. So if you think of the questions, who, when, and where. So who should you have passed to? When should you have passed? Where should you have passed? Where should you have moved to? When did you move? So questions like that, which are simple questions, you can get that question out again very, very straightforward throughout your sessions. And again, this doesn't need to be stopping at every time there's a mistake and spending 1, 2, 3 minutes in this sort of stuff. It's, Connor, who should you have passed the ball to? I should have passed the ball to John. Brilliant. Okay. Why didn't you pass it? I didn't have my head up. Right. Next time, Connor, just keep your head up. And then you're starting the game again. So it's a quick 10, 15 second coaching intervention. Can you get the message across? Is there a bit of learning takes place? Whenever you go back in here, you're going to know. Okay. And then the more powerful questions, those the what, the how, and the why. So again, so how did that go for you? What went well? Why did it go well? So you're starting to probe a wee bit more to see, well, are they actually understanding this activity? So player C could be given that ball and by total luck, they've moved it really well and the players have kept the ball. But by you saying, well, why did you pass there? The answer could just be, I just did. Or it could be, well, the defender was coming in and he was blocking off the space to player A, so I had to pass the ball over to player D. Perfect. So that's the sort of answers you're looking from. But again, it's trying to integrate these into your session. It's trying to keep them really, really short and sharp. And you're throwing in 1 or 2 questions, and then you're letting them at it. You're letting them at it again. And then I suppose this one, the diagram where we filled in, I suppose maybe what the players are thinking and that sort of stuff. And as a coach, saying what sort of questions you can provide. So the key coaching message: questions improve learning and understanding, and instructions prove that your players' ears work. So you're giving instruction, yeah, they might be hearing you, and you might get the old nodding dog syndrome where they're all looking at you, nodding head, saying, yeah. But you actually ask them a question to check for understanding, the answer may be different. So, if you look at the player in the top left, where could you move to receive an easy pass? He's going to say, over there. Brilliant, good answer. Why? So you're probing that wee bit more to see, does that player know why he's moving there? And the answer you're probably looking for there as well, player D is going to move and I'm trying to go and make that angle run to create that wee bit of space, or I'm trying to make that angle run to create the space for player C on the ball to hold on to it and move into that channel. And where does the defender not want to go and why? So again, you're trying to get your players to think, well, if I move here, maybe providing a bit of a distraction for the defender that he's going to have to move. So on the defender then, what are you going to do? So simple question, defender, what do you do here? He might say, well, I'm going to go and try and tackle the ball. Why are you going to do that? I want to dispossess. How are you going to do it? Well, I'm going to move my feet and I'm going to make my hands big. Brilliant. What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to just position myself in the middle of the three here and keep my arms really wide and try and sort of intercept the ball or try and make them make the decision. Brilliant. So either or in terms of the principal defence is brilliant there. The player there, so you're asking him, why are you standing still? Where could you move to and receive a pass and why? Okay, now listen, some of your players at this age group, they may not be developed enough to even think about these sorts of things, but as coaches, I think it's up to us to try and implement these questions to our players and to start asking them in a simple format to try and get them to start understanding. Then the player in the ball, I suppose he's loads of things he can do. Who's the best person to pass to and why? And he may be safer holding on to the ball because there's nobody free. Other defenders in a good position. What does the defender want you to do and why? Are you going to pass or take the defender on? So he has that decision to make in that split second in a game where that opportunity comes up of a 1v1. What do you want your player to do? You want them to make that right decision. Well, am I going to go by him or no? I'm going to put on the brakes here and keep possession. So again, if we can get these situations and environments in our sessions and get these types of questions across, you're hoping over time that our players will start to improve. What type of pass will you give, and where is the defender? So you can see there that every player has got 3 or 4 different decisions. They've got 3 or 4 questions going on in their head. But as coaches, are we putting them in that environment and training, and are we asking them the right questions at the right time in training to try and spark that wee bit of learning? Over to yourself there, Conor, if you want to take control back.
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. Okay, folks, look, if we revert back just briefly here to the skill refinement model, which Gareth touched on, it sort of takes you through the various stages of skill execution and skill refinement and skill perfection, I suppose, in an ideal world. Players aged 8 to 12 will gradually have progressed certainly through the static phase of skill refinement, likely through the movement phase. You would imagine at 8 to 12 years of age, given that these children will now be playing under 9.5 go games, under 11.5 go games, potentially playing at under 13, they will certainly be at a multi-directional and pressurised stage in terms of their preparation of training. The issue is that, I suppose, if they have been part of a nursery programme and they're now 11, 12 years of age and they've been in a nursery programme within the club since they were 4 or 5, some of these children will already have potentially 6, 7, even 8 years of training under their belt. Some of them will have absolutely mastered the practical execution of the skills to a fine art. But how, as coaches, do we think outside the box to continue to challenge those children who are maybe that wee bit further advanced, or that need that wee bit something, or we something different? Or how do we make our training sessions that wee bit more interactive, that wee bit more enjoyable? And I suppose it's that final column there, the whole area of innovation, that we're just going to touch on now briefly. Okay, so I move it on. Okay, yeah, so coaches working at this age group should aim to keep training as interesting and enjoyable as possible, with a focus on enhancing their players' technical skills. Children aged 8 to 12 can often have a low attention spans, and introducing new alternative methods of coaching and skill development can work wonders in a session. Consider alternative equipment from alternative sports, modified playing rules, 5 points perhaps for a point, or 2 goals at each end of the pitch perhaps. Just something that's going to be a different environment, that's going to cause a different train of thought within the players, that's just going to engage them and maybe grip their attention that wee bit more than your bog standard session that they've become accustomed to. Encourage bilateral development at this age group, which is crucial at this age group, by incorporating multi-ball activities into your session. Now guys, look, it's not something that we're going to hammer home or that we're going to say each person on this call tonight has to be doing or should be doing, but it's certainly something that as coaches that you should be open-minded to. We would be very, very naive as coaches of Gaelic games to think that we couldn't learn something from soccer or from rugby or from basketball or from American football or whatever the case may be. And look, as the next wee video shows you, whether you're a hurling coach, a camogie coach, a Gaelic football coach, whatever the case may be, there are alternative ways and means of doing the same thing that will grasp your players' attention, that will keep them involved, and probably be, truthfully, a more enjoyable way of doing the same thing. So look, we have a wee brief video here that I want you to watch. It just highlights something, maybe things that you could consider using yourself with your squads from an innovative or innovation perspective. look, folks, hopefully that video has played for everybody. And look, all of that, the purpose of that video is just to maybe make people think outside the box. You know, it might be something as simple as coming down to training some night and using a much smaller ball in training that the players are going to have to focus their hand-eye coordination much more greatly on, that they're going to have to focus their concentration much more intently on whenever they're trying to catch the ball or kick the ball. You know, other wee ideas that maybe not in the video there is the whole idea of maybe having players inside in that 3v1 tackling grid that we did, to limit players, the defender's opportunity to maybe be grabbing at jerseys. Have the defender tackle in the middle, holding a tennis ball in each hand so that they're not physically capable of actually grabbing a jersey. All they can do in that situation is use their arms, make themselves big. Use the likes of an Aussie rules ball there to, again, just to bring something a wee bit different to the session. You know, you try and play a match in training with an Aussie rules ball where it's bouncing all over the place and the players' reactions are being tested in ways that a round ball would never test them. Yet once they have the ball in their hands, they still have the same skill to execute in terms of their hand passing, their kick passing, but the levels of concentration are raised so much more by virtue of the fact that you have changed the equipment. From a hurling perspective then, you know, bring the players on an odd occasion into the ball wall. Divide them up that maybe they're doing a wee bit of physical work at the side. Some of them are maybe working off the wall, whatever the case may be. Use multiple balls, multiple slitters, multiple, whatever the case may be. Use multi-ball activities if you're a football coach where the players are carrying 2 balls at the one time and they're having the toe tap left, toe tap right, bounce left, bounce right. Just put them in an environment, folks, that they're not used to, an environment that I'm not saying they're uncomfortable with, but an environment that's going to challenge them and engage them at a level that maybe your standard training session wouldn't normally do. Okay, guys, the remainder of this evening, we're going to slightly broaden the content for this evening's presentation, I suppose. The initial part of it was very much about fine-tuning skills and skill execution. The remainder of this evening, we're going to look at, I suppose, the other aspect of games whenever you're playing, and that's the actual game sense and the development of game sense within players. Okay, just wanted to cast your eye over the details in this slide, okay? And I worked quite closely with a sports science officer from the county who was able to verify the information that's presented in this slide. And believe it or not, whether it's an under-11 Go Games match or the All-Ireland Senior Football Final, the percentages in terms of when a ball is in play in a game does not differ that greatly. So in a game, the ball is in play just over 50% of the total playing time. In under 11.5 and down, certainly, we're generally playing in around 20 minutes a half, which is 40 minutes in total, which would suggest that the ball is probably only in play about 20 to 23 minutes of the entire game. Our under 11 Go Games are an 11 aside, which involves 22 players, all of whom will generally touch the ball at some stage during the course of the game. By and large, at this age group, goalkeepers and those players who are physically dominant will generally be the players who have most possessions of the ball throughout the course of the game. Average players will only be in possession of the football for around 20 to 30 seconds during the entirety of a game. And folks, if you let that sink in for a moment or two, across the course of whenever you bring those players down there on a Saturday or a Sunday morning to play in a blitz, if you actually add up the amount of contact that each individual player has with the ball in their hands, you might only be coming in at somewhere between 20 and 30 seconds. So I suppose the question at the bottom of the screen, what are your players doing when they don't have the ball? And do we as coaches even consider what were the messages that were given to the players who are not in possession of the ball? Okay, so I've got a wee screenshot, a wee snippet here from I suppose a game. So it is. And look, this is an 11-a-side pitch setup. You can ignore the markings on the pitch there. They're just from a GAA perspective. You can imagine this being a small-sided 11-a-side Go Games hurling, Go Games football, whatever the case may be. Red team are playing from the right to the left. Blues are playing from left to right. And the red number 5 has possession of the ball there, coming out of defence in a fair amount of space, relatively unopposed. Folks, just have a look at that image and give some thought to the amount of different decisions that the players on that pitch have to make. And ask yourself, as a coach, is all your effort, all your time, is it all invested in the red number 5 there who has the ball? In that scenario, in a training game, are we given any instruction? Are we doing any open questioning to the other players on the pitch who are perhaps not in possession of the ball? Because the reality is, they are every bit as much involved in this passage of play as the ball carrier. because his pass is only as good as the run that the recipient makes or the execution of the skill in terms of catching, in terms of who he's passing to. So from a coaching perspective, some of the thoughts that perhaps these players maybe focus or maybe going through their heads. The ball carrier, first of all, should I kick, fist, solo, bounce? Who, how, where will I pass this ball to? Okay, you have a full back here who's playing behind him. Should I go and support? We've all been in this situation as juvenile coaches. You know, this full back here he's going to hurry up the pitch to go and support the ball carrier, leaving two full forwards completely unmarked there in and around the penalty box. And we see this repeatedly in juvenile games where players will do things like this. Why is that the case? Are we putting the players in situations through our training? Are we questioning them for understanding so that that fullback in this situation understands why it's not perhaps in his best interests to go and support the ball in this passage of play? Okay, you have a blue defender who is the option. Should I go and tackle? Should he go? Should he stay? Okay, if he goes and presses the ball carrier, 9 times out of 10 the ball's going to be popped over his head to the red number 6. As we see repeatedly happening in our games, in our training matches, and in our juvenile games. Okay, yep, you'll have a defender who'll come out from the other team. Okay, should I stay or should I go? Okay, maybe the stronger of the under 11s or the under 13s who thinks that he can get there and be dominant. The reality is, if that happens, okay, the goalkeeper's left thinking to himself, well, who's marking the number 11 now? Okay, he wants the ball humped in because he's now been completely left. Because this individual here out the pitch has made a bad decision to go and press the ball whenever it would probably be in his best interests to stay. And as coaches, even through our small-sided training games and through our questioning, encourage the players to make the right decisions, ask them for feedback. Do they understand why, where they're moving? Okay, is this a good space? And then you have the corner back up at the top. Who am I even marking? Okay, and again, all areas that can be worked on through small-sided games that will also incorporate the extension and refinement of skill development. Okay, so just moving on then, in terms of the questions, on the ball and off the ball, don't just focus your attention as coaches to the player who's in possession. Can I just run and score? What way am I even playing? Should I kick? Should I shoot? Should I solo? Should I hand pass? Should I bounce? Am I going to get tackled? I'm probably the one that every player at this age group the first thought that comes to their head, am I going to get hurt? Okay. Off the ball players then, where are the free spaces? Which is the best free space for me to utilise? Can I get away from my opponent, or perhaps from a defender's perspective, am I close enough to my opponent? Should I go and support the player in possession of the ball? Can I go and tackle? Again, am I going to get hurt if I do any of these things? So just as coaches, folks, be conscious of the fact that only one player can ever be in possession of the ball, but the other 10 players, if it's an 11-a-side match, have so much to contribute in terms of the outcome of the game, the outcome of a particular passage of play. Okay, just briefly, we're going to run through, before we move on to the Q&A, a few games for understanding. Okay, on the left here, and again, these games can be applied to hurling, they can be applied to football, girls, camogie, girls football, whatever the case may be. Just a simple setup where you might have 4, 5, 6 aside inside a grid, 4 coaches around the perimeter of the small pitch, each with a ball. One coach will throw the ball in, the players play to keep possession. On the call from a coach, that ball's dropped down and one of the other players will feed the ball into the game. What's the purpose? It keeps everybody thinking all the time. You might have a couple in the middle there, the blue and the red, who are in possession of the ball, but at the blow of a whistle, or at the call from one of the coaches, the players in the periphery of the game who are not in possession, they need to be clued in, because they might now be the players closest to the coach whose ball is now in possession. Okay, chaos control then, one that I absolutely love doing with Loughlin Island with our under 11s. Okay, you line them out for a match, and you'll find what happens. 2 lads will go up and stand in the forwards in a wee 6 or 7-a-side game, and they never cross the halfway line because they see themselves as forwards. And if they ever come back beyond the halfway line, they've absolutely no idea what they're doing. Instead of lining them out in that traditional format, put all the players from one side at one end, put the other team at the other end. Throw the ball up in the air, let the players charge out. It'll be like Charge of the Light Brigade, and invariably what will happen? All the players will congregate in and around the ball. Whoever gets it, 9 times out of 10, they'll either be straight through on goal or they'll have a simple pass because the players in the opposition team have all congregated around the ball carrier, leaving multiple players free around the perimeter of the pitch for an easy pass. Okay, Garrett's going to take you through another couple there.
Mute there, Connor. We have a 2-goal game there. You'll see your 2 goals set up, and again, if you don't have the portable goals available, 2 sets of poles or cones, whatever it may be. Coach with the ball, you have a 4v4, 5v5, or 3v3, whatever your numbers allow, or whatever the ability level is. Coach gives the ball, calls one of the numbers, and then the attacking team have to try and score into that goal. So probably, a wee bit of, a reaction here in terms of you might be going one way and the ball needs switch to go to the other goal, and see how the players react to that. And again, probably it's very, very important that, as a coach, that you're stepping in with that intervention every now and again, either to see why they've done it or maybe why they didn't do something. And again, we've already talked about what sort of questions to use. And again, this goal can be for goals or points. The second game then, goals and grids. So you have your grid set up at either side and your goal set up facing you. Again, if you have goalkeepers, great to throw the goalkeepers in for this because they're going to get, I suppose, in-game action in terms of shot stopping and that sort of stuff, and help with their communication and all the things that goes with being a goalkeeper. So again, coach starts with the ball, throws the ball in, and then on the coach's call, it's either grids or goals. So if you're trying to get the ball to the grid, you're then looking to see, well, how can they keep possession and get the ball to the grid, or if it's goals, they're trying to get a score. So again, in both of these games, there's loads and loads of things can be taking place. And as a coach of this age group, if you've tried things, I guess you'll see space is a massive thing. They'll all follow the ball. There's very few players will think about what Connor talked about is off the ball. Is it, where should I be moving to? How can I get into a free space? What's the best free space I need to move to? And probably as a coach in these type of games, I would be saying, if you see that player, encourage that player, point that player out to be doing something really, really well, that it's not just the person with the ball is the one that's doing the good stuff. I suppose there's loads of decisions to make here. When do you give it? Where do you give it? Do you shoot? Do you not shoot? All those different things. And then I suppose the problem solving is, well, this team has the ball. How do we defend this? How do we not let them get to goal number 2? How do we not let them get to the grid or whatever it may be? On to the next slide from there, please, Connor.
Yeah.
And then the last game then is opposite corners. So you'll see 2 yellow grids in the corner and 2 blue grids in the corner. Yellow team has to try and get the ball to the yellows, and the blue team has to try and get the ball to the blues. Yellow team gets the ball to the yellows, they maintain possession, and then they have to try and get the ball to the opposite corner. So again, probably this maybe is a game that I would like to play and try and develop maybe the kicking aspect of the game and make the playing area a wee bit bigger. But again, loads and loads of different decisions can take place in this game. And as a coach, if anyone has ever played this, you will see the players do gravitate to where the ball is, and then whenever that ball is scored in through one goal, you're looking at quick transition to the other grid, and you'll probably see the more thinking players. They're the ones when they see, when my team's getting to this corner, what do I do now? I need to try and get to a space or get as close to this other goal as I can, to retrieve a kick pass to get the ball in. Alternatively, then, if you are attacking one goal and the blues have blocked up the yellow, instead of maybe the boys trying to bull on through and score, that thinking player, they're turning and they're going the other direction to the other goal. So again, loads and loads of things you can coach loads of different those aspects of what we're talking about through this game. And again, depending on the number of players, the number of mentors and helpers you have with you, you could have 2 or 3 of these set up in the pitch with a 3v3 or 4v4 if you've a squad of 24, 25 players, and you have 3 of these going on, and you can set different rules or different conditions for each of the games depending on the ability of the players. And again, probably throughout any of the games that Connor Connor and I have spoke about there, in terms of your coaching interventions, you're looking to freeze frame at that specific time in a play and then ask the question. But to do that, always make sure that you've told your players prior to it, listen, when you hear the whistle go or when you hear me say freeze, you have to stop. Because if they move a position or they move to somewhere else at that moment, that maybe coaching intervention's gone, because what you're seeing looks different now because the players have moved. So just always get your players clear to know that, listen, when I blow the whistle or I shout freeze, you had to stop here. All right, Connor.
Yeah, Gareth, I think those games are very much the platform for developing, an understanding of attacking principles and defensive principles in terms of attacking and defending as a team that you would try and incorporate with players. If as individuals we can set up our training sessions and structure our games so that players are required to think both individually in terms of their positioning, their decision making. Is it the right thing to do? Is it the wrong thing to do? What should I be doing? Where should I be going? Players who make the right decisions individually in those small-sided games as a younger player will 100% find it easier to fall into an overall defensive structure, maybe at 14, 15, 16, or an overall attacking structure at 14, 15, 16. You can't expect players at 14 or 15 or 16 to all of a sudden be able to read each other's runs and have an understanding of attacking and defending as a team if we never ask questions of them as individuals. They have to have an individual basis of decision making before they would ever be able to incorporate it as collectively as part of an attack or a defence. Guys, look, we're not going to dwell on that too much longer because hopefully our guests that are joining us for the Q&A now will develop this conversation on a bit further. We have had a fair number of questions submitted this evening, and no better panel of players and coaches and people to help us answer those. So look, as I say, we'll get through as many of these as quickly as we can. There's a few of them around the same sort of area that we can probably touch on, but equally we'll maybe get a bit of expertise in terms of games or ideas that some of the guys may also use to develop a basic understanding of play with players of this particular age group. So Kevin, Mark, and Danny, are you with us?
Yeah, here, Connor.
Good stuff, Kevin. Mark, I think you're still muted. Danny's there. Danny's muted too.
That's me now, Connor.
Yeah, thank you. And Mark and Kevin are there. Good stuff. Okay, so first question that came in, and look, we'll just start with Kevin. So we will, if Kevin doesn't mind. Kevin, what is the best way to work with kids within one group who have varying levels of ability and interest with a view to improving everyone?
I love the way, Connor, you started with the easy question for the wee dairy man. Hey, it's a great question. Like I'm coaching the minors there at the minute, but I'm also, my wee lads now started under sixes, so I'm back down with them again. But I spent an awful lot of time in around under 10s, and I really do sit in the fence around this. And I think it's like a mix and a match to cater for all. And I know you might be thinking, oh, Jesus, why can't you not just give us one answer? The reason behind it is, it actually comes back to the question you had in one of your slides earlier on about why the kids are there. And you have changed your age groups now to class age groups, which I think is a great idea. I'm sure there's, boys will turn around and say, I'm there because my parents have played the game or my older siblings have played. But I'd say a right bit of them are there because their classmates are playing. Mm-hmm. So if you're there and you're in with your classmates and you go to training with your best mate, but he's away doing something else, will you come back the next time? I don't know. And that's what I mean by about sitting on the fence. But my way around it is, it's very simple, but it's just trying to play the law of averages. And that's basically change the focus every session. So maybe one session you might put the strong players together, and then the week with the weak. The next session you might turn around and put them in their school classes together. So, maybe even be like the under 8s, the under 7s, or whatever. Then the next thing you might bioband a wee bit and go with their sizes. So line them up from tallest to smallest and just group them off that way. And then another one, which I think should be done a lot at this age group, is on their effort, on how well they do at turning up for their sessions. If you've got a wee lad there and he might not be the best, but he never misses a session, make him the captain of one of your teams, pick him out first, make sure that he's well looked after. The other thing about it is I love the wee games that you set up there earlier on, some real clinkers. And as coaches, we can always adapt and change them to what we suit. But games such as Road to Croker, I love the Road to Croker, Connor. So if people don't understand what it is, you basically be grouping off your team, and you might have a pitch here, a pitch here, a pitch here, a pitch here, a pitch here. And you play the game, team against team, for 4 or 5 minutes, and the winners move up and the losers move down. So the winners get closer to Croke Park and the losers get closer to my pitch, Dean McGlinchey, and Ballin's Green. So you're moving up and down, and that way you'll probably find out the balance of your players anyway. The other wee thing then is it's a good wee way of dealing with small numbers. So I don't know if you're blessed with all your clubs that, you know, you're turning around there like a Kilmacud and you've got hundreds of players coming in under 10s. And then in my club, you could have 40 at one session and you could have 10 at the next. But if you're used to playing these small-sided games, then when it comes to the big numbers, people don't really care. They just know they're going to be playing the games. Hope that answers it. Yeah,
absolutely, Kevin. Look, it's one of those ones, I think there's probably no textbook answer and you have to cut your cloth to fit. But there's certainly arguments with it for both sides. Super, Kevin, thank you. And look, we'll be back to you very shortly. Danny, I'm going to throw one to you here. Danny, would you start any physical training for under 11 and a halves?
In terms of physical stuff, I suppose it depends on what you're defining as physical stuff. I think the kids are still developing there. I wouldn't really have anything too prescribed or too structured at that stage. You know, you're still looking them to be pretty subtle and pretty flexible and pretty probably strong in themselves. You know, in terms of like 10 press ups or 10 things like that. No, that's my take on it. I just wouldn't go anything there. I would do. The kids want to come and play. That they're going to get so much from. Even in hurling, people think they don't need to do 4v4s in hurling. Of course they do need to do 4v4s in hurling and let them batter away for 7 or 8 minutes at a game at a time. Like, they're going to get more running and tackling and contact in that than anything you could ever prescribe for them to do before a training session, as in a conditioning block in a training. And maybe I'm going down the wrong route there, but I wouldn't do anything too prescribed. Yes, if you've kids who you can see they're maybe lagging behind, maybe it's maybe a conversation to have with a parent more than anything, maybe. But in terms of you blocking off a part of your training for conditioning, say, no, I wouldn't be a fan of that at that age group. I would keep them playing games and different things like that, you know.
Danny, I would now, to be honest, and this is something that Gareth and I would have spoken about last week before the webinar. You know, with our under 11s there, I would consciously have increased the volume of running that they would be doing in the session. Now, that's not to say that they're doing runs in the session, but consciously they would be running more through the games and the activities. And that might just be a case of, you know, if you're asking them maybe to solo a ball from one cone to another cone, then, you know, instead of doing it over 10 or 15 meters, they might now be doing it over 20 or 25 meters, and you're constantly trying to keep them at a certain pace or at a certain intensity.
Oh, you know, that type of thing, absolutely no problem. But in terms of like a conditioning block, no, definitely no.
But I do think, like, and I hope I'm not talking out of house here, but and with this whole lockdown, I would be fearful about the health, the condition and the, you know, the general fitness levels of some of the children whenever they return to clubs, and I don't think that it's a bad thing. Gareth, do you want to come in on that one, just in terms of physical end of things for under 11s, or?
Listen, I think what you described there, Conor, is probably disguised running. You know, it's you know, people talk about fitness with the ball or conditioning with the ball. You ask them children to run between those two, I suppose, cones 25 meters without the ball, you're probably going to get huffs and puffs. You give them a ball and you ask them to do it, and you make it into a race. Well, they're going to do it at 100 mile an hour. So it's back to earlier on, I suppose, as a coach being creative and, you know, thinking, well, how can I get this work done without them knowing what they're doing? And I think that's a perfect way of doing it. Or like that, if you're playing a 3v3, make the playing area a wee bit bigger and maybe add on 5 or 10 seconds to the time. So instead of playing that game for 30 seconds, there for 40 seconds. You know, and again, you're just adding those wee bits in, but I wouldn't be an advocate of doing any type of physical training without the ball at that age group, you know. And I think you can sneak your sort of athletic development movements in through your warm-ups, you know, so any of your, you know, your sort of fundamental movements, and then your jumping, landing, your squatting, your lunging, your pushing, your pulling, without actually using any of those terms, can all be put in through warm-up movements, and you're trying to just tick that box through it.
Mark's there, isn't he? Yeah, Mark, is it more important that players can master every skill, or that you cover as many skills as possible within a training session? So I suppose in a typical session, Mark, would you suggest that people should focus on a small number of skills with a few to mastering them, or should you just jam as much as you physically can into a training session with as much variety? Andrew said he's carried Mark often enough. He owes him one. Kevin, we'll throw that over to you if you're still there.
I think, hey, Mark picked a good one to sit in the fence. What do you call it? It's a good question. My thinking on it, Connor, would be what do you want to have covered by the end of the season for this age group? Yeah. And I think that'll help you cover an awful lot of things. I don't think you can cover everything. If you took all the skills in either hurling or football and tried to cover them all, you'd be mad. But there is certain skills for certain age groups that you would like to be able to tick off. And then the other thing about them is too, you're talking about mastery of them. Well, how do you know if they're getting better at them? Unless you sort of assess them in a way. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. To see where they're at. So assessing them to me, and then the other one be is what are the main skills for that age group? And then how much time do you have? Because if you're only seeing your kids once a week, well then you're going to get doing less if you're seeing them twice a week. So probably trying to kill as many birds with one stone. Yeah. To me, there's a wee thing that you can do. I do it in my own coaching. I don't know if anyone else does it. I call it the rule of three, but officially I think it's called something like the Moscow prioritization. So what I look at is what must be done in the session, this next session, what should be done if a wee bit of time, and what could be done. Yeah. And on them three things, it's be like tonight we're going to work on the high catch, so that must be done. Maybe their previous match the boys were poor at the high catch, or in the wee game and training they're poor at the high catch, so that must be done. And then if a bit of time, I'm going to do a wee bit on striking from the weaker side. And then if I could do, it might be a bit of blocking, but I know I'm going to cover them down the line in the next couple of weeks or so.
And Kevin, just on, see the likes of those small-sided games that we were looking at, every bit as applicable to hurling and camogie as
more so, Connor. And that's just maybe being picky. I think like the easiest if somebody says, "Oh, you couldn't do it; it's too tight," make the pitch bigger. Gareth mentioned there beforehand about adjusting it for conditioning wise, but you're condition it for what you need to achieve. So if you're playing the game, it's 3v3 and it's a big massive pitch, but there's not enough tackles being put in. Make the pitch smaller, and it'll soon take care of it.
Absolutely.
I just another corner on that there one. I think on the hurling side of things, I firmly believe we don't do enough of those games. I know maybe it's reflective that there's there's probably more football people on this call, but I see it like I took my own club minors this year, and see trying to teach an 18-year-old to move off the ball, you're nearly wasting your time. Those things have to be. Yes, hurling's a very technical sport, and you have to master a lot of get good at a lot of skills before you can do those things. But I think the younger we can get kids in those scenarios, they learn a lot of stuff. Like they will learn movement and different things. And the way hurling's gone now, it's nearly like football, and it's played so fast and stuff. And trying to teach an 18 or 19-year-old kid going into senior hurling how to move, you're banging your head against the wall. So those games there, I would definitely be implementing.
Mark, are you with us?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. You're with us. Welcome to the party.
Thanks for having me.
Mark, just a question here around sort of skills testing and training, and it probably touches a bit on what Kevin was saying about how do we actually know if they're getting any better or mastering. Mark, would you recommend running skills testing, or should you just purely use the coach's observation throughout training sessions to assess players' skill levels?
I don't think it would be a bad thing. Maybe say come back to training whenever we can get back on the pitch, and then maybe monitoring that over a certain time period. But you would be able, in my opinion, to notice it through the sessions. But as a coach, definitely I would be monitoring the skills through wee skills practices or whatever drills and that you can set up yourself, in terms of shooting with right and left and solo on at certain speed and, doing things over certain times. So there's no harm in doing that there too, so it's better having those skills mastered before you take them into competition as such as well. So yeah, I think it's a good idea to have the skills tests and obviously keep records of them there too, so that you can monitor them as you go along.
Probably just worth pointing out now, Mark, as we would have mentioned at the previous webinars with the coaching officers and the 4 to 7 year olds, it is the intention of the coaching and games department that following on from this series of webinars, we are actually going to produce a bank of skills testing exercises and athletic development assessments for one set for 4 to 7 year olds, one set for 8 to 12 year olds, a set for 13 to 16 year olds, and we're going to basically share those with club coaches that they can use with their players, so that there would be basically a standardized skills assessment model being used at each age group across the county, so that people can gauge exactly where they are. And obviously the content of those skills assessments will be applicable to the type of skills that you should be delivering and working on at that particular age group. So that will hopefully be a very useful tool to coaches moving forward. And as I say, once we get the final webinar wrapped up in a week or two, whenever we get it run off, we'll be circulating that out. And Mark and Ambrose and Benny and Liam Hardy have been working away behind the scenes, and Danny as well. Sorry, Danny, behind it from a hurling perspective. The guys have been working away behind the scenes, pulling those athletic development and skills assessments together for the clubs. So we'll be sharing that shortly. Danny, I'll go back to you. Danny, we've had a question here around encouraging players to defend and attack as units at this age group. Now, I suppose, as I would have mentioned briefly earlier on there, in my opinion, at this age group, that sort of 8 to 12 year olds, I still think that you should focus on developing game sense as an individual, with a view to them then being able to incorporate into a sort of a team or a unit, maybe at an older age group. Would you concur with that, or would you be doing sort of collective defending or attacking at this particular age group?
No, I would agree with you there, Connor. I would, particularly from a hurling point of view, I would just be encouraging just normal play, and your defenders, you're working on aspects of it. Yes, you might do a wee drill that's working on defending, but in terms of like trying to implement a system of play or a system of defending as a unit, first of all, I think it'd be extremely difficult at an under 12 age group with hurling, particularly. I think it would be, you would spend your more time doing that and working on the skills, but I wouldn't be in favour of that at that age group of kids at hurling anyway. That'd be my point. I'll be working more so on their skills and encourage them to defend and the principles of defending one-on-one and things like that, as opposed to units and things. And maybe that's a backward hurling way of looking at things, but at that age group of kids, no, I wouldn't be, no.
Gareth, you want to finish on that? Anything you want to add to that?
Listen, I agree with Danny there, Connor. I think at this age group, you were trying to encourage our players. Probably, we're looking at and talk about the principle of defence, and we're looking at our tackle, and you're probably spending more time coaching them how to tackle, when to tackle. A bit around about patience and anticipation and timing and those sorts of things. To me, to start looking at a system or to start looking at coaching defensive play as a unit of this age group, I wouldn't be on for it at all. I think maybe you're wasting time on something that players probably mentally aren't mature enough and ready for yet. It's back to that, keeping everything simple and clear. So the answer would be a no, definitely not.
Mark, just a quick question here. We've had a question just around, and obviously it is permissible within the games, but would you promote at this age group boys and girls playing together?
Yeah, I don't see. Yeah, at this age group, I don't see the issue with it at all. We do it in schools, and there's never an issue with it. I think going back to the last webinar, we spoke a wee bit about screening and that there, and Kevin touched on it there in his first question too. Like, as a coach, you need to be sort of on the ball as such. Look, there's two wee friends of that there who are maybe taking apart, throw them back in together, and keep mixing it up. And I don't see the issue with boys and girls mixing. As I say to you, we do it in the schools, and there's absolutely no issue with it at all.
Super. Guys, look, I think we have we've covered most of the, I'll finish with this last one. I'll bring Kevin Kelly back in as our Ulster Hurling Development Manager. And Kevin, look, this is not a hurling specific question, but Kevin, how conscious, upon the return to play, how conscious would you as a coach at this particular age group be of the fact that children have been so long without PE in schools and so long without physical activity, just from an all-round sort of fundamental movement skills and physical literacy perspective? Like, do we need to revisit that with children of 8 to 12 years of age?
Connor, it's a really good question. I mean that. I don't know. And I'm sitting on the fence in this here because the question, see with the kids coming back, if you looked at any of the other webinars we've been on, and quote, and feel free to say I'm wrong here, but I think the stats from last year for like half the games program had so much more injuries, the GAA last year. So there's obviously something that people are expecting too much of them when they come back. Now remember that some of these players, now the age group that you're talking about here specifically, it might be okay. You know what I mean? Because they're going to come back in, and if somebody was coming in the first night from 8 to 12 and they put them on a 5 or 10 minute run before they begin the training, I'd say you're mad. Don't be worrying about selecting your team next week because you'll not have half your kids there. But to take it easy, just bear in mind how long it's been before these things are played, whatever age group you've taken. And it mightn't be a bad wee thing just to get going and get into a wee game just to see where they're at and what you're missing out on and what needs to be focused on. That would be my opinion on it. I'm thinking myself because I know in my own head, if I'm starting back with my team now shortly, that one of the first things I'm going to do after a nice wee warm up and maybe a bit of skill in it is going straight into the game. I'm just going to see where they're at and hopefully keep them involved and then focus on a few wee things that needs to be topped up on. Maybe the other lads are a bit different than that.
No, absolutely. That's what it's all about, get them playing games.
Super. Guys, listen, we won't take any more time. Look, I just would like to thank everybody for logging in tonight, especially as a bit of an update on a webinar that probably isn't quite part of this series. We still have one more webinar to go within this series, which is focusing on 13 to 16-year-olds. But next week, we have a webinar with a difference. We have Philip Kerr from O'Donovan Rossa and Mahrafelt, Aidan O'Rourke from Drummond and Porrick McDonald, who is the Games Development Officer for Kilmacud Crokes in Dublin. Next Tuesday night, the 30th of March, those three guys are going to be delivering a webinar on creating a positive club environment for our children to prosper. So that will be very much geared towards coaches of all levels, club coaching officers, and certainly the league coaching personnel within our clubs. So look, we'll be circulating an Eventbrite link first thing tomorrow morning for registration for that. We then will have the following week our final workshop around 13 to 16-year-olds when we'll be joined by Conor Laverty, the Down Under 20 coach, Owen McNichol, the Sports Science Officer for Ulster GAA, and our Senior Hurling Manager, Roland Sheehan, as well. And that will be very much a sort of a discussion-based presentation that evening, so it will. I just want to thank Mark, Danny and Kevin Kelly for joining us this evening and giving us their expertise. I want to thank Gareth again for assisting me with the delivery of tonight's webinar. And I want to thank everybody who has logged on. I thank you for all your questions and your interaction throughout the course of this evening. I hope that it has been beneficial. But other than that, folks, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your evening. And fingers crossed, we'll see you all over the next couple of weeks on the upcoming webinars as well. Thank you. Good night.